Hello there. Welcome to my review of 1989's Batman, starring Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne / Batman, Kim Basinger as Vicki Vale, and Jack Nicholson as Jack Napier / the Joker, with Michael Gough as Alfred, Pat Hingle as Commissioner Gordon, Jack Palance as Boss Carl Grissom, and featuring Robert Wuhl as Knox, and Billy D. Williams as Harvey Dent. It was written by Sam Hamm and Warren Scarron, and directed by Tim Burton, with a score by Danny Elfman and a soundtrack by Prince, which received mixed reviews, and that's being generous.
Batman soundtrack.
The production design was by Anton Furst. For those of you too young to remember 1989, let me put it this way. It was the year of the Bat. Batman was the highest grossing film of 1989 in the US, and was second only to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade worldwide. Partly due to the fact that Last Crusade had a lower age rating, because apparently it was more suitable for kids than Batman. Something I would argue is not the case, because you don't see a guy's head get cut off in Batman, although both feature gnarly skeletons at one point. They did try to get a more family-friendly age rating in the UK. The 12 certificate was virtually created by our film classification body, the BBFC, for this film. And when it went to video, it was up to a 15, because they didn't do the 12 rating for videos for another 5 years. Their justification was that if it was rated as a PG, then young children would be taken to see the film with parents thinking it was like the 1966 Batman. That was quite a common criticism of the film before its release in '89. The general public associated Batman with the Adam West series, having little knowledge of the darker direction the comics had taken, particularly in the 80s. It was an issue many parents, including my own, had about the film, associating it with family-friendly fun and not comprehending why Warner Brothers would make a film like Batman if they weren't going to make it aimed at kids. In contrast, when the film was initially announced, comic book fans had the opposite concern, that it would be far too much like the 1966 series. Part of this perception was fueled by the casting of Michael Keaton as Batman. He was known as a comedy actor when the film was announced, most recognisable from the film Mr. Mom, a high-concept comedy where, get this, Keaton's character has to become a house husband and look after the kids while his wife goes out to work. I mean, can you imagine? I'm being a bit flippant, it's not a bad film. His casting was so badly received that Warner Brothers had 50,000 letters of complaint about it, which is the modern equivalent of about 1 billion tweets. Not only was he seen as a comedy actor, but he was seen as too normal looking. Batman is supposed to be this lantern-jawed Superman, not an average Joe. Even Adam West had movie star looks. Keaton had character actor looks. So scared were Warners that this would put people off, that they cobbled together a 90-second trailer as quickly as possible and screened it to a standing ovation. As a result of those screenings and a viral marketing campaign before viral marketing campaigns existed, it meant that the bat symbol was everywhere.
We're expecting in Batman boxer shorts next week. There's an alarm clock with a bat signal that goes like this. There's pens where Batman chases the Joker through some fluid.
I was far too young to see the film at the time. I didn't have any of the toys, but the imagery was still everywhere, and it was quite hypnotic. The colour scheme may have even influenced my choice of colour scheme on this channel. A boy I went to school with had the symbol shaved into the back of his head and was immediately told to have it shaved out, but it was everywhere, and in my honest opinion, it's still the best symbol they've ever done. So on to the film itself. The performances are for the most part very good. Jack Nicholson is perhaps allowed a little too much freedom in places. While some of his choices are brilliant, others don't quite work. And some of the extras could have done with a little direction, as it sometimes feels that
he stole my balloons! Why didn't somebody tell me that he had one of those things?
It's an amateur theatre improv class. I think you can put both of these things down to Tim Burton's lack of experience at the time, this being only his second feature-length film. The production design is exceptional. A mixture of brutalism and Art Deco that inspired the look of the animated series by Anton Furst. This helps the film feel more timeless than something set in the real world. Had it been a real city with period correct costume and production design from the late 80s, it would probably look ridiculous now. But it feels classic rather than dated because it was dated when they made it. The script is somewhat uneven. There are some real highlights, hugely quotable lines.
I'm Batman.
It's Japanese.
How do you know?
Because I bought it in Japan.
You weigh a little more than 108.
Oh, really? You must be joking.
Do I look like I'm joking? Where does he get those wonderful toys?
He stole my balloons!
Great set pieces and great characterization, but also some really clunky dialogue. Some of the model shots linger a little too long, revealing that they are clearly model shots, and it feels like the structure is either lacking a few shots or has a few shots that run on too long. In that respect, it feels a little like a comic book, where because of the nature of the medium, you aren't given all the information of what is happening and have to fill in the gaps yourself, or can choose to linger on a particular panel perhaps too long and see the flaws. For example, in the scene where mobster Carl Grissom tells Jack Napier to destroy the records of his wrongdoing from his Axis Chemicals plant and make it look like a robbery, it relies on a wide shot of Grisham surrounded by mobsters that lingers a little too long on these extras who don't really do anything and don't really know what they're supposed to be doing and aren't involved anyway in the scene. It's beautifully framed and would make an excellent establishing shot, but, and again I think this is down to Burton's inexperience, it just stays there, just too long. One thing the script does incredibly well is establish the characters. After the opening credits weave their way through the canyons and crevasses of the now iconic bat symbol, accompanied by Danny Elfman's sweeping gothic score. The film opens in a really clever way for those who know Batman's origin story well. It looks like we're about to witness an interpretation of that as a husband and wife and their young son try to catch a cab after a trip to the Monarch Theatre. The keen-eared may have noticed that the husband's name is Harold, not Thomas, but at this point could be dismissed as a creative choice to change the name of Bruce's father. The keen-eyed will notice that the husband, Harold, is played by Garrick Hagan, Biggs Darklighter from Star Wars, as both films were shot in England, meaning several minor roles in both films are taken up by English actors or American or Canadian actors who lived in England. Hagan has another Batman connection, voicing Henry Adams in the 2015 game Batman Arkham Knight. The wife is played by Hagan's real wife, Lisa Ross, in their only on-screen appearance together. And remarkably, the son is played by a young Christian Bale. Sorry, that's a lie. As much fun as it would be, it's actually Adrian Myers, who only has one other credit alongside this. As they get lost in an alley, possibly Crime Alley, they are mugged by Christopher Fairbank, who I know best as Moxie in A Vida Same Pet, but returned to comic book movies fairly recently as the Broker in Guardians of the Galaxy. Unlike Batman's origin, however, he just knocks out the father, and we cut to my favourite shot of the entire film, as high above the city, Batman watches, then turns and disappears into the night. This is clearly a cell animation version of Batman, and I personally think it's supposed to be noticed as a nod to Batman's origins and to Tim Burton's past as an animator. It's not entirely necessary and could have easily been cut out if they weren't happy with the effect. It's not supposed to be noticeable, so I'm firmly of the belief it's there for a reason. As the mugger and his accomplice are looking through their loot on the rooftop, they begin to discuss the rumours of a bat creature dispatching criminals, letting us know that Batman is not yet a public figure, but still a rumour in the underworld. This simple scene tells us everything we need to know to get the film started, and explains, narratively speaking, why Batman didn't stop the mugging, which might have been what a more experienced Dark Knight would have done. We then get a beautifully composed shot of the muggers in the foreground, and Batman floating silently from above in the background. Batman confronts the muggers, and, after being shot by them, to no effect, he delivers one of his most iconic movie lines, apparently suggested by Michael Keaton himself. It's beautifully done and really sets up the concept of a figure of fear for Gotham's underworld. By contrast, we are then introduced to the people who should be protecting Gotham, the Mayor, the DA and the Police Commissioner, who plan to go after clearly well-known crime boss Carl Grissom, as Grissom's right-hand man, Jack Napier, watches the televised speech. Napier is also having an affair with Grissom's gal, Alicia. We then meet crooked cop Eckhart, played by another Star Wars actor, William Hootkins, who played Porkins. He's the most corrupt of Gotham police, working directly for Grissom, something which Gordon seems only too aware of, yet unable to do anything about. Then reporter Alexander Knox shows up, the only man who believes there is a giant bat running or flying around Gotham, in his only appearance in any DC material, save for a fun cameo in the Arrowverse crossover event Crisis on Infinite Earths.
I hope you're watching, big guy.
Not long after that, we meet Vicki Vale at Knox's paper, as he is teased for his Batman stories and handed a sketch by Cassandra's father from Only Fools and Horses, Dennis Lill, here apparently playing Bob Kane, who co-created Batman with Bill Finger. I have to say that Vicki Vale is not particularly well written. Her character is, but her dialogue is often not. She seems to get the clunkiest of the exposition.
I'm here to see some of the wildlife in Gotham City.
Like what?
Like bats.
We finish off the introductions with Bruce Wayne holding a casino night to raise funds for the Gotham Festival, the mayor's plan to bring honest business back to Gotham City. And this is where he meets Vicki and Knox, and is ably assisted by Alfred when Commissioner Gordon is called away to deal with Napier. This characterization is all really well done, giving us brief snippets of scenes of the main players. The first act really moves at quite a pace. In just 24 minutes we are introduced to all the main characters and several side characters, and have a good idea of some of their backstory and motivations. Some of it is a little cartoonish by today's standards, but it puts all the pieces in place, so from here on out Burton is able to play with them. The tone of 1950s noir, mixed with Burton's hyper-stylized live-action animation, works great when it works, but can also slide into the ridiculous in places. You have to suspend disbelief to really appreciate it, as some of it starts to unravel if you think about it too much. But the fact that it is quite dark really helps to balance some of the silliness. I feel that a more experienced Burton would have made a few different choices than he does in this film. That would have papered over the cracks a bit better. But I don't think that overall it spoils the viewing experience. There are plenty of things to pick apart about the film if you choose to, and I could see why people might take against it for little plot holes, but I really think it's charming enough to get away with them. I will, however, always cringe at the scene where Vicki is trying to distract the Joker and starts kissing his thick wool jacket. I don't know what that's about, and I don't think they did either, as Vale realises the ridiculousness of what she's doing and continues anyway. What's known as hanging a lampshade by drawing attention to how odd something is in order to head off any complaints that it's odd. But I think they could just write the scene a bit differently. It seems like the film has a bit of a problem with sex altogether. The romance between Vicki and Bruce is severely undercooked. It speeds through their meeting, having dinner, having sex, and having their first fight in around 2 or 3 minutes of screen time, and isn't particularly romantic or passionate. It feels like it's just there to be there. To be fair, how the Joker is characterised is pretty terrific. He is unhinged, but also extremely intelligent, able to formulate complex plans that ultimately serve the purpose of indiscriminately killing people for no other reason than it amuses him. While the character differs in many ways to the comic book version, this central conceit is really part of the fabric of the character, and the way the film chooses to portray this really does work. There aren't too many similarities to the source material, as this film is very much in the inspired by camp than a direct adaptation of the comic books, but it takes the elements it wants from the comics and then tells its own story and creates its own mythos. Perhaps the most significant change is that in this version, the killer of Bruce's parents isn't some random street thug that ends up dying because of, but not at the hands of, Batman. He's a young Jack Napier, long before he becomes the Joker. The film acknowledges how the two are each other's origin story, and it's a really interesting and perhaps obvious choice that had yet to be explored at the time. Some people find this too much of a change from the source material, but I think it works. Another big change that some struggle with, and that more recently others have pointed to in order to justify Zack Snyder's version of the character, is that Batman kills quite a few of Joker's goons, and the Joker himself. He blows them up and he throws them down bell towers or off balconies with gay abandon, but I think the way it's done in the film is fairly logical and fits in with this version of the character. The few deaths he is directly responsible for don't need to happen, and I don't actually think they affect the story, but they're there and I think they work in the context of the film. It's far from a perfect movie. As I've highlighted, it is flawed, but it also has a great atmosphere, some truly brilliant scenes, like when Batman is rescuing Vicki Vale and drives her to the Batcave. It's shot brilliantly, the car looks great, and the sensational score really makes the relatively brief scenes look, quite frankly, like art. Some of the naivety is really charming, and essentially it's still very entertaining. At a time when the only other comic book movie character in film was Superman, this was a stark contrast to that character that moved comic books forward one more step. It is style over substance in a lot of places, but in the best possible way, and that style remains iconic to this day. Thank you. Goodbye.